Well, when I first all started on the square, my dad, he's 85, bless him, he used to race pigeons. And he said, "You're doing what? You're chasing the..." I said, "No, these are feral pigeons, Dad. These are not racing pigeons, like, you know." So he was a little bit, oh, that's okay then, you know. But no, it is a shame because it was over 100 years the pigeons was on the square, you know, for, so.
People all over the world are fascinated by birds. For many hundreds of years, birds have been kept as pets for sport and for food. In modern society, it might seem unlikely that traditional pursuits such as falconry would remain popular, but I've been discovering that bird business is booming, and birds of prey in particular rule the roost.
I think it was back in, I think it was 2003, when Ken Livingstone decided to have a bit of a clean-up, because they used to have about 12,000 pigeons on the square, and it was getting kind of messy, and the windowsills of the National Gallery was full of pigeons' nests and droppings, and it was a little bit of a health hazard. So they decided as well, you know, to bring the hawks in and have a clean-up, basically. So what I normally do, I normally walk, if I've got two hawks out, I normally walk around. Yeah. So the hawks come down to this end, then I go up the top, and they go on top of the roof. And if any pigeons on the grass, then they normally go. Then I come back down this end and just sort of keep an eye out for pigeons coming in. Because if you get one pigeon come in, 2, 10, 20, 30, they keep on coming in. Yeah. And a few years back we used to have a problem with the Pigeon Alliance people. Right. And Pigeon Alliance, yeah.
They like for protection of pigeons?
Yeah, they want the hawks gone and the pigeons back on the square. So what they normally do, they normally see where the falconer is on the square, and see where the hawk is, then they chuck a load of bread or a load of seed on the grass. So one pigeon will come in, then you have 10 pigeons, then you've got to try and get the hawk back quick before the hawk sees a massive pigeon feeding like a frenzy. Yeah. Otherwise the hawk will go across, then they'll take a photo and they'll sell it to the newspapers.
Clearly, a minority of people resent the change in Trafalgar Square pecking order, but out in the countryside I found that some folks were willing to pay good money to get their talents into a falconry experience.
Out in Asia, where falconry actually started, they started off with just using a piece of cloth wrapped round their right arm. Several hundred years later, falconry moved from Asia and came across the world and finally hit here over in Europe. Now, falconry was only really done by the gentry until the last 20, 30 years, really. Only very wealthy people were allowed to fly a bird. Now, but it would have been people that were not so well paid would have actually trained the birds for them.
I think I've always been fascinated by birds. When I was about 10, 11, I used to stay around my nan's of a weekend, used to breed budgies and canaries. But I've always been like fascinated with birds of prey. Now this is Lizzie. She's a South American Harris hawk, and she's about 7.5 years old. And I did breed this bird. As I say, we fly them in Trafalgar Square for about 3 hours a day. And I also got another hawk, another female called Rosie. Females are bigger than the males. Yeah, the males are sort of 3/4 their size, really, the female. Once you start catching rabbits or whatever, you won't be able to fly it as a pest control bird. Because someone's got a small dog they don't know the difference between a small dog and a rabbit. So it could be,
Yeah.
that's why we don't show these, you know, too much fur or feather.
Yeah.
Normally start to train them when they're about 3.5, 4 months old. So we put the anklets on them, and then we put the jessies with a leash, so we can hold on to them.
Well, essentially, the company was formed out of a request by the owner of a bakery who had a problem with house sparrows and starlings. At that time, there was no environmental services. We had no company, but our family have always been involved in falconry as a recreational sport. We just took a couple of birds along, and it seemed to do the trick, and it sort of developed from there. So that was 25 years ago.
So is Lizzie, she's yours? Like, I mean, obviously she works with you for
Yeah.
your job, but she's your bird.
Yeah.
And do you still have other birds that aren't work birds?
Yeah, I've got a barn owls, what I fly at home, and little North African white-faced Scops owls. I've got a pair of those as well.
Yeah.
What we used to fly, we don't fly no more. And I've got a pair of North American red-tailed hawks, which are slightly bigger, and they're more like a creamy chest. The female's about 16, 17 years old, and she's on 3 eggs at the moment. So I've got about 10 birds in all.
Back in the countryside, I sensed I wasn't the only person thinking about a career change. Falconry is hard work though, and juveniles like this baby owl need round-the-clock attention.
Saki, ladies and gentlemen, is 9 years old. We've had her since she's 2 weeks old, and she's been a very large part of our family for many, many years. The noise she's making, guys, is the sound of a baby owl. Okay, it's the noise that this owl would make as a youngster. Now, because I've never kicked her out of home, as far as she is concerned, she will always be a baby in her mind. We've got, saying earlier about these baby barn owls, I've got one that's 9 days old, and it's not now, but for the first 4 days, you feed them 24 hours a day.
That's a lot of dedication, and I wondered, what sort of affection do trainers like Charlotte and Wayne feel for their birds?
You know, you have to draw the line, really. It's like having an horse on the field and thinking, oh, I wish I could take it indoors with me. But then, once you train these birds to a degree where you want them to fly back to you, and that's all you need to do. You know, I mean, obviously they are my pets, and I did lose Lizzie's sister about 6 months back, that was quite sad. She flew into a window up in Tottenham Court Road, and yeah, we sadly lost her.
My dad has had and kept birds since he was 13, 14 years old, so I've grown up around birds all my life. Birds have been an integral part of, you know, all our lives. We've always known falcons and hawks to be in and around the house, so it's it's a fairly natural thing for us. Obviously, the falconry experiences have been around a long time, and yeah, I think they're great. Anything that sort of can, raise people's perception, awareness of, of birds and our environment and nature in general. I think there's got to be a good thing. I mean, you've only got to look around today and you see people are fascinated by birds of prey in general, and they're wonderful creatures. And if people can, get close and learn a bit more about them, then yeah, I think it's got to be a good thing.
It's undeniable that birds are crucial for Wayne, Dave and Charlotte's livelihoods, but more than that, I saw a real love for the animals and an affection between trainer and bird that reassured me these are not just working birds, but also feathered friends.